Hello everyone, my name is Bridget. I am the student support coach and assessor for the Mind Body Food Institute, and today we are here with our director Viki.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to talk about our brand new course, our Emotional Processing and Nervous System Regulation Practitioner Certification. Very, very exciting. Bridget's really into this work as well as much as I am, and I hope that you are too. So we're going to answer some questions for you, aren't we, Bridget?
Yes, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this a little bit more with you today and hopefully giving some potential students some clarity on what they can expect.
Excellent. Let's go.
Okay, so firstly, I'm going to maybe ask a very broad question, which is, what was your intention in writing the course? What is it that you want potential students to get out of it?
A sense of empowerment around a deeper relationship to self so that overwhelm, emotional overspill, getting triggered by all kinds of different events, situations, people, places, memories becomes much easier to understand, to tune into, to observe, and be more kind and compassionate towards within ourselves and our growth, which really came about more so during COVID when I was witnessing a lot of people coming into our courses having a lot of emotions around what was happening in the world, the uncertainty of it, and the changes in dynamics of relationships and living environments and work responsibilities and the way that those things were being carried out that were changing for them. And how many of the students started to really feel overwhelmed by all of those things and all of those changes and didn't have the skills to really navigate what they were experiencing, how they were experiencing their emotions, how they were relating to other people, relating to themselves. That sort of started it off when I started seeing a lot of mental health issues increasing. And since then, we've had such a demand on mental health services around the world because of these significant life changes and challenges. But what it also did for me was highlight this is again something else that we don't learn as children. We all experience stress. We all have a nervous system and a brain. We all experience a lot of different situations and events as children that are interpreted differently. The meaning that we shape around that is different, but in some ways is also universal in the way that we internalize those experiences and create a lot of limitations in our belief systems. So just like stress, we don't learn that at school. We also don't learn about our emotions. We don't learn about this beautiful emotional world that we all possess as human beings. And we don't learn that these emotions have a place in our human experience. They're supposed to be there to feed back how we're internalizing the world around us. So the environment around us, how we are uniquely experiencing that internally, and then what the body is feeding back to us and what we're noticing, how we're feeling, how our mood changes, how we relate to the world around us, and how we relate to ourselves. And because we don't learn these skills as children, sometimes our emotions get the better of us. Many times our emotions get the better of us. It triggers certain actions of behavior that often start in early childhood that we simply carry on into adulthood. And they can sometimes intensify in certain situations when certain things are said to us, when certain things occur around us that we feel are out of our control. And our internal reaction to it, that driving behavior of trying to figure out what the world means, what this means to us, and our emotional reaction or response to it. Those are skills that are necessary for creating a sense of internal capability, of resilience, of adaptability, of flexibility, which is all things that we want to be able to develop in the nervous system. But if we don't even learn these things in school, if we don't learn these things as human beings when we go out into the big wide world, these are things that can plague us, that can hold us back, that can really interrupt our ability to be resilient, to feel confident and capable in handling a situation, even if that means setting boundaries and walking away from confrontation, to give ourselves a moment to recalibrate, to breathe, to tune in, and really assess, what is this experience that I'm feeling? Why is that I'm triggered? What do I choose to do about it? That's something that I've observed quite intensely over the last few years, since COVID particularly. But it's also one of the driving motivators that create a lot of challenges for people in relationships. So it's an essential skill, I believe, that we all need to learn.
I 100% agree there. I really, really felt that as you were talking about it, and I'm sure lots of people resonate. And I often think about how different my life would have been growing up if I had have learnt those essential skills at school, knowing how to express my emotions in a healthy way. Yeah, so I'm sure many people resonate with that. And I felt it in my chest as you were talking about COVID, because I'm pretty sure that was at the time that I was actually studying at the institute. I remembered sitting at home and not being able to leave the house. Lots of memories there.
Yeah, and I think those impacts, those memories are something that a lot of people are still carrying within them,
Mm,
because there are a lot of questions coming up. How's my life functioning at the moment? And is there a different way to do it? And I think that really started to spark a question for a lot of people, recognizing there was a different way to show up and do work, for example. But it also was quite confronting with relationships and situations that really provoked a lot of emotional reaction that people didn't know how to deal with. And there were a lot of relationship breakdowns. There were a lot of domestic violence situations. There were a lot of mental health conditions where people just could not cope because everything just got too much and too overwhelming. And that's a patterning that we see in the nervous system when we talk about trauma. So that's why this course is trauma informed, to be aware for the practitioner what it is, how it shows up, how it manifests and resides in the body. So it's not something we're always consciously aware of, so that we have the skills to recognize those patterns, help educate and support our clients where possible, and in certain situations, know when to refer so that we always work within our scope of practice.
beautiful. We might dive in a little bit deeper and learn some more specifics about the course, go through a few common questions that we've been receiving lately. The first one is, what's the difference between the Mind Body Practitioner course and the new Emotional Processing and Nervous System Regulation course?
The mind body practitioner really focuses on that bidirectional relationship between mind and body, which we often refer to as the body mind. And it really helps to understand childhood conditioning around how our beliefs are formed and how that also interplays in terms of our mindset, our behaviors, and how that impacts our habits. But it really focuses on using applied neuroscience tools to disrupt those patterns and to really work to challenge them, to gradually reframe and rewire those patterns in the mind and body, so that using other evidence-based practices like positive psychology, applied neuroscience tools, and a few other really cool things to start to bring that connection together and respect that information highway, we can really start to help everything work together. That is originally what I wrote in the dual certification. And I quite honestly always wanted to put this section in about emotions, about the bottom up aspect, so that we're not just looking at things from top down. And this is really just a framework and a way of understanding how the brain processes information. So, the emotional processing and nervous system regulation is, I always envisioned, an extension of the mind body practitioner. It's very different information, a lot more tools and resources and ways of working with the brain and the nervous system, but from a completely different perspective. So we're not just looking at the foundation of the mind body connection and what it is and how it functions and works and influences our beliefs and behaviors. We're actually looking specifically at how the emotions are tied up within that bidirectional system and how the neurobiology is impacted when we're experiencing emotions, being driven to behave in certain patterns, and don't really understand what's going on within the system. in how we show up and relate to the world around us. So the emotional processing is all about really learning what are emotions, how are they generated within the body mind, how do they show up in our world, in our life, and starting to bring a better language, a higher quality emotional literacy instead of I'm fine, I'm good, oh, I'm stressed. Really starting to expand that vocabulary by really looking at what emotions are and
Getting
how
rid of
they.
getting rid of that I am statement.
Yes, because we feel these things. We're not necessarily these things. And it's
Yeah.
really making that distinction between I am stressed to I feel stressed, which is a much more accurate representation. So if we can change the language around that, if we can expand our vocabulary, if we can really look at what are emotions, they're chemical messengers, they're sensory information that is creating a message from our body to our brain to say, hey, this is what is being evoked from this internalization of what's going on in here, out there, and what it's causing within me and what it's making me want to do in response to that. So that we can then start to look at how can we process these emotions healthfully? Because if we don't process our emotions in a healthy way, they often show up in very unhealthy ways. They show up in destructive patterns of relating to other people in our relationships. They show up as procrastination. They show up as addictions. They show up as trauma. They show up in detrimental ways. And that's that sense of feeling stuck. This is where understanding from the bottom up perspective, we can then start to work with that. We can get curious. We can get compassionate about what we're feeling instead of berating ourselves and getting down on ourselves because, oops, we did it again. We behaved in the same way. We said the thing that we didn't want to say. We upset somebody else. We've hurt them. Now we feel ashamed, guilty, blaming ourselves. Instead of understanding there's a reason for that. Our emotions are trying to feed back to us what's really happening for us. So instead of getting angry at ourselves, instead of creating that frustration and really causing more stress and tension in the system, it's getting curious about what is the message? What is the body trying to feed back to us? What is this feeling, this emotion that's being created, that has created this feeling within us? What is it actually trying to alert us to so that we can then take appropriate action to attend to our needs, to set boundaries, to speak up, to protect ourselves, to seek help if we need it, so that we can take more appropriate action for what we're experiencing. And then, of course, a whole variety of different top down, bottom up
Yeah.
energy, cognitive, somatic practices to really help us find the best ways for us to attend to those emotions, to support the nervous system, and to really find those resources that work for us to recalibrate when we really need to.
Beautiful. I love that. The next one we have is how much does the course cover polyvagal theory and somatic practices?
There are a lot of somatic practices woven throughout. And the way that I've done the course is I really set up in the first 2 to 4 modules the neurobiology of emotions, how they're created, and then moving into how they impact our patterns of behavior, our patterns of thinking, our patterns of relating to other people, of self relating, so that we've got that foundation of how they're showing up. And then that translates into the foundation of understanding stress in the nervous system because stress is so pervasive in modern day life, but stress and all of the other emotions that can cause stress are really closely tied to our nervous system states. And when I say states, I mean the different states of mobilization and rest in the nervous system that helps us show up and deal with our daily life demands. And many of us lead very busy, very demanding lives. We're juggling a lot of things. Our nervous system is really trying to attend to all of those demands as best it can. But depending on our early childhood conditioning, depending on our neurodevelopment, depending on the unique life experiences and circumstances that we've grown up in our family environment, what we've learned about stress, what we've learned about relating and speaking up about how we feel and how we rest, how we experience stress, how our parents experienced all of those things as well, we're taking on a lot of learned behaviors that sometimes don't really serve us when we make it to adulthood. So a lot of that conditioning is happening below the surface of our awareness. And by understanding our own nervous system, how it's wired, and what it's designed to do, which is really to protect us, to keep us safe. It's always keeping an eye out and surveilling our external environment, feeding that information via our senses inside so that we can interpret based on our unique wiring. What does that mean? Am I safe? Is it safe in my space? Do I feel safe in response to that? That necessarily has to be set up as the first sort of foundation in the first couple of modules so that we then, with that information about the nervous system, can then start to layer on the polyvagal theory and look at the nervous system through that lens of polyvagal theory. It's a tricky one if you just dive straight into polyvagal theory to try and understand, as you well know. So having that foundation of the nervous system, understanding that and how it relates to stress and trauma, and then layering over the top polyvagal theory, that's a whole module of looking at the nervous system through polyvagal theory. So then we can really start to understand those survival instincts and those different states in the nervous system from a completely different perspective to really appreciate how hard the nervous system works for us, constantly moving up and down in its ability to protect us, to keep us safe, depending on what it's perceiving, which again is unique for all of us.
Yeah, and there's plenty of exercises too, having read the course, which helps learn more and develop your own self-awareness around your different nervous system states as it relates back to polyvagal theory as well.
Absolutely. So those first four modules, I've really tried to lay the foundation of all of these concepts. And then the remainder of the course really builds upon and relates back to that foundational knowledge so that you have the knowledge to understand why these tools work, why we use these certain tools, which direction they're moving in and trying to work down to down regulate certain emotional responses, or they're working from the bottom up and we're trying to upregulate some of our emotional responses and our nervous system's reactions. So I've tried to relay all of the many, many, many tools, many tools and exercises and practices throughout the second half of the course. Really relate them back to polyvagal theory, relate them back to the nervous system states, and look at them from the perspective of cognition and our beliefs, from our somatic experience and the felt sense of the body from bottom up, and then also the energy that's created in the body, the energy that maybe is needing to be attended to in the body. So, really looking at cognitive, somatic, and energy based practices that build upon all of that theory. So it really puts it together. You understand why these tools work and how they work, how they relate to all of that. So that really gives you the support to be able to educate your clients and know exactly why and what and how.
Yeah, and just because we have all these somatic tools available to us, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to work for us or our client. It's very much about the individual and their current experience. So having this huge toolkit is such an amazing thing because it really helps develop our own self-awareness around what tools work for us and what we find valuable and really want to lean into.
Exactly, exactly. Having a somatic or a emotional regulation or a nervous system regulation toolkit, however you would like to refer to it, we like to call it a resourcing kit. So all of the resources that you need for top down, bottom up, outside in is going to be there for you. It's all very necessary for you to put those things together based on what you find works for you in any moment or day
Yeah.
that you need it. Not all of the tools are going to work for everybody because we are so uniquely wired. So it's really about presenting a lot of different tools to try to experience, to see if they resonate for you, so that through trial and error, through application, through experience, through embodiment, you're really able to then select your own unique resourcing kit by the end of the course so that you know what works for you and you know which ones that you can employ depending on what state you're in and what you need to do to support yourself to move and shift out of that state or to calm that state. That's something that I think is really important to understand, along with it's a process. It's not a quick fix. This is a lifetime of learning that once we understand how things work within our own mind and body, and we know how they're showing up in our lives, it's about utilizing these tools when we need them for the rest of our lives so that we have so much more ability to meet life where we're at. And that's something that we say to our students a lot is always meet your clients where they're at. So this is really a great learning to meet yourself where you're at as you're going through the experience of the course. Because with every course I write, there's always practical elements to really apply what you're learning so that the knowledge becomes experience. And that then translates into a much better ability to really guide and support your clients because you have that experiential knowledge to help them understand what's actually going on for them.
Wonderful. Okay, how long do students have to complete the course? What's the time frame?
There are 8 modules and they are released weekly. I don't want anyone to go through the course and try and rush through it. As I just said before, this is a process. So, with those 8 weeks of the learning materials and then the practitioner toolkit, which is quite comprehensive, there is 6 months completion time to complete this course. So, there are some written questionnaire tasks as well as some competency quizzes. And there is a client session scenario case where, with examples of session plans, you are going to choose a scenario and design your own 3 week or 3 session client plan. So there's plenty of time to do that. You could complete the course in 10 weeks, 9 weeks, maybe, but you could complete the course definitely within 10 weeks, 12 weeks max. However, we do allow more than double the time, like we do for all of our certification courses. So there is a 6 months completion time. And the reason that we have completion times when we're offering certification courses is that there must be a learning window. It must be contained within a certain period of time so that knowledge isn't acquired and then not applied and forgotten. It's a consistency of learning and application and really embodying that knowledge, that experience, so that you are very confident by the time that you reach the end of that course within that learning window to know what you're doing, how you're going to be doing it with your clients.
And how might the course benefit other professionals such as yoga teachers, counselors, coaches, I guess anything and everything in between, other practitioners?
I think for those who are already qualified and working with clients, particularly, this is such a wonderful addition to expand their toolkit. Because if you're already working with your students as a yoga teacher, for example, if you're already a body worker, maybe you offer massage therapy or kinesiology or Reiki, even a personal trainer. You're consistently working with people who are experiencing a range of emotions that are manifesting in their body and showing up in certain patterns. Sometimes that might be just tightness, stiffness, a feeling of nausea or headaches or tension. Sometimes it might manifest as chronic pain, and we do address that in the course as well. So all of those things are already incorporated into the work that if you're qualified in any of those modalities, they're already kind of being touched upon in the work you're doing. So the benefit of doing this particular course specifically is taking a deep dive into emotional healing from an evidence-based framework of top down, bottom up, outside in, and really understanding the nervous system, stress, trauma, and looking at that through a polyvagal lens so that you're then acquiring all of this fantastic knowledge, fascinating knowledge, in fact, and a range of tools to really tailor and personalize the work that you're currently doing with clients by bringing in this whole new dimension, this whole new way of working with the brain and the body and the emotional world that every single person carries within them. I think for those particularly, it would be fantastic as a CPD, continuing professional development course. For those who are not qualified in any of those modalities, it would be perfect to add on to coaching or therapy or any kind of healthcare practitioner as well, to really bring in that element that is just not there in traditional training.
No, it's
It's
not,
not,
is it? And we
no.
can never know too much about the body and our emotions.
We're constantly learning. And that's one of the other things, Bridget. I'm glad you mentioned that, because every year or so, I will always go through and update. If I find something that I think is a great addition, or some new piece of information that's come to us through science or trials, I'll try and put that in and weave in that new awareness, because there's just so much we don't know, particularly when it comes to the brain. There's always new things coming up, and I think it's important to be aware of those new things. So I like to update the course fairly regularly. Anytime I see something that I think would be a perfect addition, to insert that in there, just for your awareness, so that you're keeping abreast of some of those newer insights and studies that are coming out, and how that might really benefit you or your clients.
Wonderful. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up?
Last year, I personally experienced burnout and overwhelm. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was not attending to my needs. I was really neglecting my sleep. I was neglecting eating regularly and moving my body, sitting too much, taking on the responsibility and the weight of everything, and really trying to figure out life while completely ignoring what my body was saying to me. And that really impacted me last year. In the first few months of last year, I had to make some really tough decisions, make changes that felt more aligned with where I wanted the institute to move. And that meant that I wasn't paying attention to myself and my emotions. My mood, my stress levels were all over the place, and it was really impacting me and my closest relationships. And that was cause for concern when I realized, this is not me. This is not how I want to be relating to the world. This is not how I want the people closest to me to feel when they're near me, because they're picking up on my energy, they're picking up on my stress, and they're feeling it in the intensity of the words of, I've got so much to do, and I have to keep doing this. And I really had to have a bit of a wake up call, because I did not like how I felt. I did not like how everything was impacting me in my sense of self. And I really decided, I've got to step back here, and I've got to look at what's going on. And I wanted to start with the basics, which was going back to looking at my stress and my stress patterns and my nervous system, which are topics I've been teaching on for nearly 15 years now, that I always love to dive into. And I kind of totally forgot some of the basics, because, we do this work, we get so caught up in it, we love what we do. And sometimes that responsibility takes center stage, instead of actually embodying that work and practicing that work. And this is where we come back to, it's a process, and it's a commitment to ourselves to actually show up and use these tools that we know and love, and not get so stuck in, all of these other things that try and take our attention away from the things that are most important. So that for me last year was a big learning curve. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to dive into this a lot more, and finally put that component into our offerings that I had always wanted to put into the Mind Body Practitioner in some way. But it turned into not just one or two modules, it turned into a whole other thing, as I was really diving in and applying these tools and practices to myself. And it's over a year later, I'm feeling a lot more calm about things. I've made significant changes in the business, I've made changes to the team, I have a good environment around me that I've created. And it's really enabled me to get back to doing what I love. So this course was actually quite a saving grace for me, in actually putting it together and practicing it and utilizing it myself. And it's made such a huge shift in my life to reorient myself back to what's most important. That everything else can wait. And it's really helped me also look back at certain conditioning from a different perspective. We talk about polyvagal theory and looking at the nervous system in a polyvagal lens. you've seen in the course, I've shared some personal anecdotes and stories from my childhood and from my experience with an eating disorder. And being able to look at that now through a polyvagal lens, being able to understand that addiction and those behaviors with more compassion and more awareness of what was really happening within my system, that's been quite cathartic. And I know many of our students have had eating disorders themselves. I know many of them have depression and anxiety. Many of them are struggling with a lot of different things. They've had so many challenges, cancer, parents passing away, friends, partners, just some horrible things since COVID, particularly. And they've really felt overwhelmed, like I was feeling last year, that they couldn't cope with all of this stimulus coming at them to
Yeah.
try and make headway to the other side. So this is sort of a testament to that process of taking that time, committing to ourselves, committing to the process, and honoring what we're feeling instead of ignoring it.
Yeah.
So important.
I think the polyvagal theory aspect really helps us make sense of our own experience, and then that layered with so many different practical exercises really helps with the awareness, which in turn really helps us develop that self-compassion, which is really what we need to help move forward. Thank you so much, Viki, for that personal share. And to any potential students, you can expect a little bit more of that in the course. If you're wanting further information, we invite you to jump onto the course page and check it out. And we look forward to welcoming many new students in the future. Thank you so much.
We certainly do. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.